Cool. All right, so let's get started, I would say. So, welcome everyone to this Foliage Art Beginners Workshop. I'm Dennis. I'm Foliage and Environment Artist at Electric Square. I've recently worked on Diablo 4 as Foliage Artist, and I'm working on another realistic AAA title at the moment on Foliage, which I'm unfortunately not allowed to talk about so far, but that is everything that I can say about me, quick and short. And in the end, I will, in the end of this presentation, I will also talk a little bit about how I got in the industry as a foliage artist, or basically how I became a foliage artist. So there will be a bit more information in the end later on. All right. So let's get started with the workshop, I would say. So I would really quickly give a sort of like quick overview of what topics we're going to cover here. So first of all, I will explain what foliage art is, what sort of like skill set you need as a foliage artist, the overlapping areas where foliage pretty much fits in, how to get from a biome to a single asset or the other way around. And we're also going to briefly talk about different art styles. So after that, we then take a look at the foliage art pipeline, where I also prepared several demo sessions for. So we're going to take a look at complexity levels, the pre-production process and some considerations, the texture creation, plant creation, performance, how to create variations, and part of the pipeline is also the export in engine. But during this workshop, we're not going to focus on that because we'll be using the Speedtree Learning Edition, where you are not allowed to export any assets out of. So you can sort of like do that at home as well. The Speedtree Learning Edition is available for free. And the engine export, I can already say that here is usually handled by Tech Art as well, as plants usually need a fairly complex setup in engine. So we're not going to focus on that one necessarily. And after that, I have prepared a few starter recommendations, talking about free software that is available and giving some recommendations what to focus on when you want to become a foliage artist. And as already mentioned, if there's time left, I will talk a little bit about my personal story. All right. So let's first talk about what is foliage art. So this is sort of like my personal definition. And foliage art is basically a specialized area of environment design, focusing on the creation of everything related to the flora of a game or movie. It is centered around vegetation and ranges from single asset creation to entire biomes, and these can differ widely depending on the type of media and its art style. Then let's take a look at the overlapping areas. So as a foliage artist, it can be that you have to work on your on leaf materials in Substance Designer, for instance. That sometimes requires collaboration with material artists, or that could be even part of your job. What is also often required is that you need to create your own bark textures. I have an example screenshot here of a Substance Designer material by Preston O'Brien I found on ArtStation. What could also be is that you need to think about where your plants are growing, and do you need tech support with shaders to create, for instance, snow effects or ice on vegetation, and this is all something that needs to be considered. And furthermore, obviously, so we have an example here from good old Skyrim. Collectible plants is another big topic that is also usually handled by foliage artists. And there you need to think about how the plants will look like when the player picked them up. They usually change their appearance slightly, and that also needs to be properly set up with tech art and level design. So, and last but not least, lighting is a very important topic. While you do not need to be a sort of like lighting artist or perfectionist in that area of expertise, it is important to work together with lighting artists to make your foliage look as it should, as lighting, especially on foliage, plays a huge part or contributes a lot to the final look of your foliage. So, next we're going to talk about the skill set of a foliage artist. So, generally spoken, I think you should have an interest in environment art. That is a given, I think. You should have a keen eye for good compositions, especially when you work on like entire biomes, and even on a single plant like a more complex tree. You need to be able to create an interesting silhouette and composition. You should have interest in nature. You should be interested in working cross-discipline. As already mentioned, it is very likely that you work together with tech art or level design and other departments in your company. And that obviously comes with being a good team player. You should have at least an interest in tech art, as foliage can be quite techy. When you work in Speedtree, for instance, it is more about like moving sliders, understanding how Substance Designer works, and all these sort of like more technical programs. They are a little bit different from what general artists are doing. You should be detail-oriented as well, especially when we take a look at AAA game quality foliage. It is really down to the most granular detail, and in order to achieve the quality standards that you're looking for. As already mentioned, a foliage artist also needs some texturing skills, and you should be able to have some lighting art fundamentals in order to communicate clearly with the lighting arting team and the needs and everything you need in order to make your foliage look great. Sculpting skills is another big topic, which is mostly needed for when you're working on stylized games, as especially for stylized games, it could be that you need to sculpt tree trunks, for instance, or even leaves and things like that. So having sculpting skills always comes in handy. And some general 3D modeling skills are also required. I mean, we had it already as a topic in the chat here. Carnivorous plants, for instance, they are highly bespoke, and Speedtree isn't really made to create those. So you need to really bend the rules if you want to force Speedtree to create plants like that, or you just pick a conventional 3D modeling software and get the job done in that way, which can be sometimes much quicker. So, let's talk about the Foliage Art pipeline. The pipeline. So, the pipeline is the following. We usually start with collecting some references. This can be done by actually going outside, taking pictures of the environment, observing the environment, or if that is impossible and you're working on a game that is taking place in a region where you can't just simply go, you might want to look for reference pictures on the internet and collect them in a software like PureRef, for instance. The next step would then be concepting, which is quite niche and not always required, as concepting is only needed for plants that sort of like where you can't find any references for. We are talking about alien plants, or maybe even some highly bespoke assets that need to be custom created, where you can't find any references for. But it's not always needed. And then next, we'll move on to the texture creation. That is usually done in Substance Designer, where we create a leaf atlas, and then that leaf atlas is being taken and used in Speedtree in order to create a so-called leaf cluster. I will talk about that in more detail later. And after that is done, we actually get to plant creation, which also takes place in Speedtree. And once that is done, we can then start applying wind animations and setting up our LODs. And afterwards, we take the plant that was created. I usually start with the complex one, and then variants will be created out of those. As we have already everything set up in that file, we can easily just copy it over and go from there. And last but not least, the engine import, depending on what engine you're working with, for instance, Unreal Engine, that is, again, in collaboration with TechArt, most likely. So before we get started with like any sort of like practical bits in the Foliage Art pipeline, I wanted to get to some considerations, I call it. So this is the big theory part of this presentation, and I find it quite valuable to bring this information across, because I think this is exactly the sort of like value on top that I can hopefully add in comparison to generic YouTube tutorials that will talk about how to create stuff in Substance Designer, how to make trees in Speedtree. This is more about the the way of thinking as a foliage artist and what you need. And we're going to start off looking at different complexity levels, so we can sort of like have a better understanding of what types of foliage exist. And the most simplistic stuff you could ever work on, I think, is something like debris, and then going a step up would be simple grass, where you just need a really good texture and a fairly simplistic setup in Speedtree, or you can even do it in a conventional 3D modeling software. That will get you there without any complex stuff to do. The next step up then would be complex weeds. Weeds already tend to have some sort of blossoms or seeds or something like that. They are a little bit more bespoke, but they are still fairly simplistic in their setup. The next more complex thing you could work on then is bushes. Bushes already require a fundamentally complex branch structure with some sort of leafy canopy. So you already need to put like much more thought process behind how a bush is built up. And we start to talk about a hierarchical branch structure systems already here, which is more complex. And then going up to simple trees, where all of that applies to as well. But they are even more complex. They can have a much more complex canopy, and you need to think about driving the silhouette as an artist to make the tree look interesting. And last but not least, we have complex trees. Complex trees, also called hero assets, are highly bespoke. They can cover a wide area, and they might require a bespoke photo-scanned tree trunk, or even a hand-sculpted trunk. They have a very complex canopy that needs to be set up correctly, and it can take a week, if not even longer, to work on such an asset. All right, then some further considerations here. I would like to talk about some stuff to think about before you even get started. So I guess the first thing I want to mention is that silhouette readability is key. So that applies to like other 3D meshes as well, obviously. But if you take a look at this black and white mask of a tree that I've created in Speedtree, I hope you see that this is looking like a tree, even in the silhouette. Otherwise, I would have done a very bad job. So making something that looks like vegetation from far away is pretty much the first thing you should think about when designing or drive the silhouette in Speedtree and you create your plant. The next thing is seasons and extreme conditions. It's a little bit of a rare edge case, but it can really enhance the look and feel of what you're creating. For instance, I found this picture here on the internet where we can see a heavily windswept tree. It looks quite odd, but we can really see and we can feel what the environment is like when we look at that picture. We know that there's like constant wind streaming from one specific direction that is forming that tree, and that tree hasn't even got the chance to grow against the wind. It is growing with the wind, and keeping these things in mind can sometimes really push the identity of the biomes and the environment that you are working on for your game. Then another topic I want to briefly mention is to avoid the uncanny valley. So when you're working on foliage, you want to make sure that while it's detailed and highly specific, you want to make sure that it's also generic enough to get a decent reusability out of your assets. I found that the picture on the top right here is apparently called an elephant tree or something like that. It is looking very weird, even though it is an actual picture. It is a tree that exists in that way. I would probably not create that for your game that you're working on, because the reusability of such assets is very low. It just looks very off, and the player would probably think, "Oh my, what went wrong here?" Instead of, "Oh, this is looking nice." This is also something I think a really useful thing to keep in mind is that as a foliage artist, you want to make sure that everything you create, ideally, players do not notice. It's a little bit it's a little bit sad. But if you think about it, our job as foliage artist is to create something that is looking convincing and realistic, and ideally the player just walks through the environment without noticing what you've even created. It should feel as natural as it can be. If you have things where the player stops and is like, oh, this is looking weird, or why are the leaves like this or that, or if the player starts asking questions, then that could be an indicator that you've done a bad job. Roots is also something I briefly wanted to mention because it is something that is often overlooked. Roots are super important to ground your assets and make them feel like they belong in the environment. What you can often see, especially in older games, is that trees are just stuck into the terrain and the connection isn't there. It looks fairly off. They are just not grounded, and then it feels like a generic 3D asset. But when you start making sure that the surrounding of your foliage and the roots and everything is blending nicely with the terrain, and it sort of like sits in there as it is supposed to be there, then things start to look fairly natural. And last but not least, I want to mention leaf scale and texel density. Also something that you can see fairly often is where people try to scale up leaves in order to get some more weight in the canopy, to stuff like fake canopy thickness or density. Often done in older games as well, because there wasn't really the opportunity to add that many leaf cards to a tree. Otherwise, your engine would explode. So often things were just scaled up. But then if you walk up close as a player, and you will notice that a leaf all of a sudden becomes as big as your torso, then things fall apart. So that is also something to keep in mind when you want to work on realistic foliage. All right. Just taking a sip here. The next topic I want to talk about is knowing your goals. So this presentation, as already mentioned, is mostly about, or is focused on AAA game high fidelity specific foliage, opposed to generic, simplified, or stylized foliage. And I'm not saying here that stylized foliage is in any way generic or simplified. It is just this is not what we're going to focus on during this presentation. So everything I will mention is only applicable to that sort of like type of game. And that's being said, sometimes the task can be quite unclear that you are tasked with as a foliage artist. So it could be that you're starting a project and you'll get the task to work on a jungle game. And then you need to think about what defines the biome identity even, and which plants are even needed. Which plants grow together? Will there be player interaction with the plants? Do some plants even have cultural use cases? Are some maybe even used in the game, in the lore, as sort of like medicinal use or something like that? Do we need any burned plants or fallen trees? What is the rate of deforestation? Is something like that even needed? And what I want to say here is that the biome always comes first. And again, I'm only talking about sort of like AAA titles here, where you have an open world maybe, and you need to work on entire biomes. In that case, you should never think about a single plant. You should always think about the big picture, the entire biome, and then figuring out what plants are even needed and going down from there. All right, then a bit of background information that I also want to give here. Not going too much into detail, I have a few pictures of like my tree books here, which is giving you a little bit of insight of what foliage is about, so to say. So I guess what I want to mention here is that plants can look very similar, but there's often a huge difference in the details, and therefore accuracy matters. So you cannot just say, I want to make a maple tree. That is probably not specific enough. You need to perform intense research to verify the specific plant subspecies that you actually want to work on, and therefore collect all the references that are needed to do so. Like we can see this family tree here, and often when you go out in nature, you will only notice the family. So you go out and you say like, oh, this is a maple tree. well, that is correct. But what type of subspecies species is it actually that you want to work on? And then I don't want to go too much off topic, but I want to mention that you should be careful of AI art. I need to mention it nowadays, and it also needs to be mentioned in this workshop, I think. What I came across when I was gathering references also for this workshop is I came across a lot of AI art foliage pictures, and it is sometimes difficult because they tend to look so realistic nowadays. But when you look in the details and the picture says that was created by AI or combined by AI, it is really something you need to be careful of, because AI can look fairly realistic, but it cannot know anything about foliage subspecies and the genus of foliage. It will just create some generic stuff that you can't really use and you should not rely on. So be a little bit careful. Don't fool yourself with looking up references on the internet. Like, double check everything that you see nowadays. Then again, without going too much into detail, but I think it's important to mention. So we usually deal with two types of foliage. So there's two big groups in the foliage world. One big group is conifers and the other big group is broadleaves. So conifers is everything that has a sort of like needle-like leaf structure, like pine trees and all that kind of stuff. And broadleaves is everything like deciduous trees, everything that has leaves. Everything that has leaves is considered to be a broadleaf, pretty much. And these are the two big players. Another important thing I want to mention, and this might not look important, but this will be very important later on when we work on something in Speedtree. I want to mention that there's different there's different ways of how leaves are attached to branches. The ones that you can see here are not even all the different options. They just show a few. So you can get like the sort of like opposite structure where leaves are attached in an opposite way on a branch, or you can get an alternate structure where leaves are sort of like offset. And these are the rules that in the end you want to figure out about the plant that you're working on, because otherwise you won't be able to create them. It's as simple as that. If you don't have the recipe of creating a plant, you will never be able to create that plant. Okay, then after all this sort of like theory and these considerations, let's actually start with the foliage art pipeline. And the first step here is collecting references. So the first big topic I want to talk about is how to get from generic references to specific subspecies references. So it could be that you've done your initial reference research. I'm using the maple tree as an example here again, which is also something we take a look at during the demo sessions later. So we've done some research, but we actually don't know what type of maple tree this still is. This could be like references from every sort of like tree, maple tree that exists out there. So what we can do here is we can use foliage books to identify what we actually have references for. So in this case, you can see already the foliage book shows us Norway maples, silver maple, sugar maple, red maple, sycamore maple, but we have no idea what type of plant we are actually working on. So we need to figure that out. And by looking closely at your references and comparing them with what you can see in these books, you can get quite far already. The specific book I was showing, I will get to in the end of this presentation. I will show you the title of the book, and I can even figure out where you can get them from. So another online tool then you can use for that, and I'm also using that at work, is plantnet.org. It's a really nice online platform where people sort of like share their location and pictures from where they've taken, where they found a certain plant. And then this is being used as a base of a data set that is then being used for when you upload an image of a plant. Some sort of, again, it's AI, so be careful. Tools will figure out what's the probability of what plant we are having here or we are dealing with. So take your initial references and throw them in plantnet.org, and just make sure you do not only use one image. Check the identifier for the different components of your tree, like leaves, barks, or the entire tree silhouette, to increase the probability of finding the right species. And again, do not trust this by default. Take the results into consideration and check with your other resources, like books. So in this case, we've seen that my leaf reference has given a 60% probability of it being a sycamore maple, the bark texture to 85%, and the silhouette to 33%. So now we know we can probably say that what we are dealing with here in specific is a sycamore maple tree. And taking a look at the book, it says long grown in the UK and fully naturalized. That makes sense because I'm living in the UK and this tree is growing everywhere here. So with this combined knowledge, I can fairly confidently say that this is a sycamore maple tree. So now that we know the species that we are working on, we can start collecting specific references. This is a step I always do with everything, like with every plant that I start working on when I create stuff at work as well. So I first of all look at shape references. This will define the silhouette, or will help you finding a good silhouette, and define the size of the plant that you're working on. And it is quite important. It will be your main reference for when you're modeling the plant in Speedtree. Next, you need variation references. This is to figure out the large, medium, small, and sapling versions. Like, this is so you can create different variations in the end. Because when we talk about creating a specific plant, for games, you usually do not only create one plant, you create an entire set of that plant. And to get variation, you usually want to have a large, a medium, a small, maybe even a sapling sometimes. And this is why we need that type of reference. The next important type of reference is leaf references, and they will give you an indication of the maturity, the level of decay, the size of the leaves, and also which variations you need. It might not always be required, but it can be quite useful to have blossom, seeds, or fruit references as well. That is just an extra on top. But what is very important, though, is the front references. And that, I cannot stress enough, is probably the most important reference of all of them, as front references this is basically the recipe of what the plant, or how the plant is being created. This will show you what you need to do in order to recreate it in Speedtree. So without having this recipe and the front references, you won't really be able to replicate any branch structure or even the entire plant at all. Next is obviously bark references. As we can see here already, you might find that that by going outside and looking at trees like maple trees, for instance, you will see that there's a wide range of different bark textures. But again, like, don't fool yourself. This doesn't mean it's a different tree. It could just be because of the age of the tree or the surrounding it's growing in. Like, let's take a look at the left. We have a bark texture that is looking fairly different from the ones at the right here, and this is probably because this tree is growing next to a road. It's fairly different from the surrounding if it grows compared to when it grows in a forest. And then the bark texture next to it is from a very young maple tree, while the grey bark texture underneath is from a very old maple tree. And this just shows that with maturity, the look of barks can differ widely. So in the end, you just need to make a call on what type of texture you want to create, stick with one specific bark that is generic enough, and go with it. And then last but not least, bare branches references can be, if you can get hold of them, be super useful. as those. This basically shows you, again, the recipe of how the tree is being built. And you could probably, by using this reference picture or one-to-one replicate it in Speedtree, you do not have all the distracting leaves that are hiding the underlying branch structure, which is why sometimes you look at a tree and you think you know everything about the tree, but because the leaves are hiding the substructure, you can't even really tell how that tree is being built. So this type of reference can be insanely useful if you have it. Okay, then I want to talk about concepting as well. Not too much, because again, it's more needed for stylized games or alien plants and whatnot. That's being said, it's only for bespoke assets and plants that do not really exist on Earth that require some concepting. And it could be that a concept artist is doing that for you. But nowadays in the gaming industry, it could well be that you as a foliage artist are also just being tasked with creating some silhouettes, making some concepts and coming up with your own ideas. Again, here we can see another example of this is being carried out. Some simple concepts have been created. The plant has been sculpted in ZBrush. This, for instance, is a good example of something that has not seen Speedtree at all. But more of like conventional 3D modeling software, and in the end you get your alien plant sitting there in the environment. And this is why I mentioned you might need some sculpting skills as well. All right. The next topic here is the texture creation, and the texture creation has two steps basically. So first of all, the leaf atlas needs to be created, and this contains single leaves only. And afterwards, these single leaves are then taken into Speedtree to create a more complex leaf cluster atlas. And this leaf cluster atlas is then combining all these leaves and attaches them to each other. And I will show you the difference now. So this is the two different types of textures you need in order to create a tree. It's a leaf atlas and a leaf cluster, and the leaf atlas showing single leaves and other components needed for the leaf cluster creation, and the leaf cluster is showing the final branch cards that are then used for the actual plant creation. So there's always two steps. Sometimes the leaf cluster can be skipped. For instance, for grasses and like super simple things, you only need single leaves or something. Then you only need a leaf atlas, but it's quite rare case. Okay, let's take a look at how to create a leaf atlas. First, a little bit of theory, and then we'll jump into Substance Designer and cover a few techniques how to get started on creating your own leaf. So, leaf atlas is usually done in Substance Designer or by using Photogrammetry, and I will also explain how that works. Again, the leaf atlas always comes first, and you could also use Quixel Megascans, or as mentioned, photometric stereo scanning is the specific method that I will talk about in a bit. You could also sculpt the leaves, which is often done for stylized games. But yeah, the advantage of doing it in Substance Designer is that you have the most control and a high reusability. And the good thing is you can react to feedback as well. Like if your art director is saying, we want these leaves to look different, or your lead artist has a word in there as well, you can easily adapt and change your nodes in Substance Designer, and you end up with different looking leaves. And this method is highly recommendable for, especially when you're working on stylized games or something like that, because then you can always tweak the textures afterwards. So here we can see a leaf atlas created in Substance Designer that I've taken from a personal project I'm working on. It is in very early stages, so I just want to say this can be pushed much, much further. You can create a leaf atlas in Substance Designer that is looking almost photorealistic. So don't be. I just want to give that as a disclaimer. So don't look at these two pictures and think, okay, we can't hit the quality bar, and this is why we go for photo scanning. That is not necessarily correct. All right. Then again, here really quickly, just to show it, this would be a sculpted leaf in ZBrush. And you can create your atlas with that as well, and then render them out as a texture, or you can even use that as a mesh, and then there you have your plant. Okay, and that will lead you to our first demo session, where I will show you a basic setup of how to create leaves in Substance Designer. So, let's get started with an empty package. So I'll copy some stuff over. I'll just copy the export notes over from a previous graph I've worked on, so we don't have to recreate all of that. Control copy, go in here, Control V. You should create your own presets in Substance Designer when you work on these things more often. Okay, so what I want to show in this short demo session here is the way of creating leaves in Substance Designer. And I want to say, like, this method I've learned from Eric Wiley. He's material and environment artist at Blizzard, and he is a really good Substance Designer artist. And I believe he also has a very good long tutorial on YouTube about this method, where he goes into detail about all these parts, and I will just now give a quick overview on introduction level, how to set this up, like the big picture. We're not going to focus on creating a highly detailed leaf now. I'll just show you how to set up the graph and sort of like how to create this. So first of all, you need two different graphs. The idea of this workflow is to have a graph that is your leaf generator. In here, we're gonna create a generator that is creating one single leaf. But we will, in the end, not in this session, but if you work on your personal project, for instance, you can drive this as far as it becomes a very complex thing. So the leaf generator will, in the end, have a ton of exposed variables that are that can then be used and tweaked to create different looking leaves. And the other graph we need is a the leaf atlas. And in the atlas, we combine the single leaves and put them all together. So they will become an atlas. And I also want to say, like, don't worry about like any like too much negative space in the atlas or something, because this atlas is not the one that is being used as a final texture in game. This atlas is just so you can use it in Speedtree. So don't think about performance here at all. It really doesn't matter. So taking a look at the leaf generator now. What I always like to do, or how this technique works, well, I should say with the new Substance Designer version, we have now spline tools in place as well. So on my personal projects and the more complex leaf generators I'm working on, I'm using splines. But for the sake of simplicity, we are sticking with the legacy workflows now, not using splines, because that would be a little bit too complicated. So we need a linear gradient attached to a curve. We'll probably want to rotate that 190 degrees. And this curve will then drive our leaf shape. So this might look a little bit weird, but you will see soon how this works. So this is half of a leaf that you can see here. Next, we want to apply a cross-section to this, which will give us the alpha. And then we want to transform this, turn it around, offset it by 0.5 in X direction, and mirror it. All right. So, and now what we can already see here, we have full control over the leaf shape, but just using this curve. And you can also add more points to the curve to even like make this more high fidelity and get like better control over your creation here. So this is the way you can easily create leaves in Substance Designer. And let's take a look at what we actually want to create as we are working on a sycamore maple tree. We wanna get this type of leaf, and this type of leaf I want to mention already is fairly complex, right? We are not dealing with a single fingered leaf, I would say. So I've chosen this example because it is so complex, and it's not a big deal though. The only thing that you should always think about is breaking this up into something that you can work with. So how I see this is basically nothing different than a leaf that has 5 fingers, which are of a similar structure. So we can just create one of these fingers and then move it and duplicate it around in order to create our final leaf shape. So what I'm doing here now is tweaking that leaf shape to something that fits our reference picture a little bit better. Should probably something like that. And then we can use that one to sort of like transform it and duplicate it around. But before we are doing this, we should keep in mind that there's 2 different main components you need to create a leaf. Mostly you need to, the challenge here is to find a way of combining the leaf shape with a venation in there. And the venation is basically the most complex thing that you can work on when you're working on a leaf generator. I'm talking from experience because I've done extensive research on all different venation types and patterns that exist out there. And it is a whole different topic on its own. But we're going to start simple by using a linear gradient again. And this time we then quantize grayscale this gradient, which will give us this sort of like stepping effect. And afterwards we do an edge detect. Also, by the way, I should probably have mentioned this in the beginning. I hope it's all right. I'm using Substance Designer here as if you know this software already. There is unfortunately not enough time to teach you how this software works if you don't know about it. So this is a little bit more advanced already, but I hope that's all right. We keep it fairly simple. So we invert this mask. I would usually go down with the edge width to the lowest number, but we can't see it in the stream here, so I'll stick with a little bit of a bigger value. And then we'll go with a directional warp, and we need 2 additional gradients. We need a linear gradient, and we need this one, and this one needs to be turned 90 degrees. And then we blend this together using multiply and create this. And this is our directional warp intensity. You won't see anything now because we need to really increase the intensity to a high value, and we need to rotate this by 90 degrees and turn this up to 200 or something. Oh, that is not doing much. It reset the angle. There we go. Minus 90. So, and you can see here already that this is sort of like looking something like a venation structure, and we could even now go and offset like 1/2 a little bit, so we get this sort of like offset in here. Can do that maybe really quickly. You would use again another directional warp. Then you would use shape and scale it down by 0.5. Maybe. Like this. So, and now we only want to warp one side. This is now slightly offset. A little bit unfortunate. Should be accurate with this. Maybe this is not working perfectly. But you can see here, Oh, I think it was just the angle, minus 90. View this. It's not matching perfectly. It should, though, in order to make this work. The angle. It's the angle again. My keyboard is a little bit finicky, as the 0 key sometimes doesn't work. And then it puts in 9 instead of 90. Okay. Yeah, this is working. And this way you could create like easily an offset. And now you can already see that by using the quantized grayscale steps, we can then control the amount of veins that your leaf will have. And now the only thing that is missing is a midrib, and that can be easily added as well by blending another shape to this. Want to scale it down to probably 0.001 and just add it to this one. All right, maybe like that. So now we have our venation, and that is still separate from the leaf shape, and we need to sort of like find a way to combine those. You could like use them to multiply it on top of each other or something. So what we can do now is we blend this and just multiply this on top, which will get rid of all the surrounding venation stuff. We'll get a little bit of some errors here at the very top. That is something that you can get rid of. I think it might be because of this offset or this one here. But if you make sure that your leaf cutout is not going into these areas, like we could take it like this and get rid of that error that way. That will be one way of dealing with it. All right. So what we want to do now is we need to create these fingers. So what we can do is we use a transform. And we want to disable tiling. We can already use a mirror on the next one. And blend these two together. All right, and once more. Adding those as well. Scaling them down a little bit. Obviously, you could, again, like go much more into detail with this, maybe create like bespoke fingers that are not looking the same to break this up even further. But all I'm saying here, this is all procedural. So now we can go back and we can change the amount of venation that we have here. We could even go back to our curve now and adjust the leaf shape. Obviously, we need to be a little bit careful with like intersections here. But yeah, and then we would just do the same transforms on the leaf shape as well on this one. And this will give us our alpha, and this will give us our venation. So the idea now, I haven't explained this yet, is that the leaf generator output will be a single RGBA packed texture. So we basically have 4 channels, 4 grayscale channels that we can utilize. And usually in one grayscale channel, you can plug in the actual alpha, the other channel, and you can make this even fancier. You could like blend this again multiplying this with your shape now and beveling this one inwards. And this will give you a sort of like nice fall off towards the edges as well, so your veins do not run right up to the edges. That's a nice, neat detail, and that we can plug in here already. So we can now store up to 4 different types of information in this RGBA merged node. And usually you want to have your venation separate. So this is why we're creating these masks, is so we then later in the Leaf Atlas can use them independently for our base color creation, our normal map creation, and so on and so forth. So you want to really think about what different components is my leaf made of. And these components are the ones that you want to have in these different channels. So you want to have the silhouette, obviously. You want to have the venation. Maybe you even want to keep the midribs separately because they sometimes have a different color. Like here, they are more sap greenish, or they are thicker or something. You also obviously need a height map. And the height map, again, this is very simple. But what I would like to do always when I get started is we histogram range this, because a height map should never go up to full white and black values. So we put this down to a decent value, and then we can start a sort of like blending in our venation using maybe subtract or something, not on full, and things like that. So this way, this is now a very simplistic height map, but you can build on top of this, creating pillows, creating the little cells on the leaves even, and all these features that you need in your height map. And that goes in a separate channel as well. And if you want, we could even like grab the outline here, because some leaves have a sort of like brighter outline, or if you want to work on stylized leaves, why not? We have the space, so just put it in here. So, and this is then our output. So we don't need those. Those would appear as outputs. And we don't want those. Then in the Leaf Atlas, oopsie, our outputs are gone. Quickly get them. Control copy. Control V. There they are again. So what we want to do here is we now want to create an atlas. As I've shown earlier, this could be looking like, like this basically. And I usually like to work with a grid. So we use a tile generator here. And we set this to square. And we, let's keep it simple. We, I think I moved something there by scrolling the mouse wheel. Tile generator. We keep it simple and set the amount to 3 by 3. So this atlas would be a 3 by 3 atlas. We go for a square. And then we change the luminance by number to a value. And then this mask, so to say, can be later even used for finding out where decay should be applied to certain leaves and stuff. It really helps. Like this could be a mask that can also be used to multiply base color information on top of your leaves. So some leaves will be brighter, greenish, some will be darker, to get some nice variation in there. But to get started, I always plug this one into the opacity output. Actually, I should probably view outputs in 3D view. Not showing anything. Well, maybe it will soon. We'll see. So the what we want to do now is we need to arrange these. So we want to transform this, and we obviously need to split our packed RGBA data. So we use RGBA split. And we set this blending mode to pre-multiplied alpha blending. That is just a setting you need to set when working with like color data in here. You can copy this over. So yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate that we can't see our mask here in the opacity. Maybe put it in the base color. Nothing is really showing up. That's a little bit annoying. View outputs in 3D view. That's a bummer. Ah, okay. I guess it just needed a reset. There we go. That's better. Wonderful. So we drag this in, and here, how much time I spent on a leaf atlas. Usually in production, what I try to aim for is creating a leaf generator that is then used on a project that I'm working on, and that is as versatile enough to create all sorts of different leaves you need for a game. So ideally, this process only needs to be done once, and once this has been set up correctly, it will be a super complex setup in the end. It can take weeks to work on this, but once it's done, you can reuse it for pretty much everything you want to do, and then it will only take up to an hour or two to make your leaves ready for the next plant that you're working on, and so on and so forth. And you will even find that you develop your leaf generator while working on the next plant. For instance, now we have to deal with grass, so maybe we need to implement a different type of venation, like parallel venation, for instance, which is mostly used on grass leaves. And then you just implement that one, and it will be there for the next plant you work on, and so on and so forth. So yeah, but if you start from scratch, if you were to start from scratch every time creating a leaf atlas, I would give it a week. This is usually how long it takes. So what we have here is our split data. As you can see, the height map, the edge, the silhouette, and the veins. And that can be used now, but this is looking like it's a single leaf. But what we want to do actually, so we need to get this into some sort of preview mode. I want to multiply this with that. Or maybe edit on top. Yeah. So this is just for preview purposes, so we know where we are moving our leaves to. That's all this is about. So we scale this down now and move it in here. So that will be our first leaf. And this way this is how you create your atlas. So this is a little bit of manual work, but nothing too complicated. So I will only do it for 2 leaves now, but you see where this is going. So you will fill in the atlas. And each leaf then has different settings in the generator applied to it. Our generator doesn't have any parameters exposed so far. I can let us quickly do that here so we can see something. So in the quantized grayscale, we expose the steps as new parameter, and we call it venation amount, maybe. And this curve input we make as an input grayscale, and we take this and use it in the atlas for each specific leaf. So you see things have changed. This node all of a sudden has an input, and it has a steps. It's called steps. That's annoying. This should be called venation amount. But yeah, not a big deal. So we can now do this. And can use this curve to then make this leaf look different, right? So this is how you could easily create a different leaf. Done. And yeah, you do that with all your leaves on the atlas, and you will end up with something great. And that is obviously populating over to your different channels, and then these channels can be used to create, for instance, the base color. So we start with a uniform color that is pick a generic stuff like dark green, and blend everything. use this mask. So we can see here we get some color in there already. We can now remove the debug. As we are done with that, we just have the leaves and the clean shape. And now, because we have all our information split in our different channels, we could use this one for our normal map creation, for instance. So let's do a quick. It won't look great. It won't look great. I can already tell. We can create a very basic normal map here. That's done. And we can then blend and use the venation, which is stored in the first channel, and make this, for instance, brighter. Just a little bit more yellowish, more saturation, brighter. And there you can see we've added some color to the veins. And yeah, so I guess, well, this leads us to the end of this quick demo session. It is fairly simplistic, but I hope you can see how you can create a highly bespoke and complex leaf atlases with this method. I can't find my... Oh yeah, here it is. So again, this is also still super early steps, but we can see here already that we got some bug bites information here. We got some frilled edges. You can add some decay to some leaves by using the mask that we've just used, and there's a lot of stuff you can do with that. And yeah, I hope that gives you a sort of like starting point. And if you want to know more about it, as mentioned already, Eric Wiley YouTube tutorial, the way to go. All right, let's go back to the presentation and the next topic. The next topic is texture creation, also the leaf atlas, but using photogrammetry. And I bet you could even do that at home with like the setup you have. You don't need any professional equipment, but the method is called photometric stereo scanning, and all you need is a camera or your phone, a tripod or something solid your camera can rest on. Then ideally a lighting table or something similar. I'm using an iPad Pro 12.9 inch. I just had that laying around, and it serves a good purpose for this photo scanning. You obviously need leaves to scan them. You need a flashlight or a torch. Phone light will be enough, and you obviously need a lens. I use a 50mm prime lens. That's a good one. Was recommended by a senior foliage artist at my company, because it captures enough detail to get some really good looking results. Here we can see some leaves. I quickly wanted to mention the state of the leaves. What I often do is I put a book on the leaves for about like 2 hours to flatten them out a little bit. But you want to make sure that you don't press them like super flat, because you want some undulation in the normal map for when you scan them. But you also cannot deal with like leaves that are sort of like super deformed, because they are pretty much impossible to scan, because they will cast a shadow on themselves, and that will be visible in the texture, and that is something that we can't use. So this is how it could look like when you have your leaves distributed on your iPad or whatever you're using. Here we see the setup of a tripod with a camera pointing straight downwards, and the leaves being put on the lighting table. So just taking a sip. On the lighting table, make sure here that your leaves are not extending over the backlit shape, because that is later on very important when we create our subsurface scattering map. So I guess this slide is the most important one for this section. And I've also written it down here, so you can read that at your own pace later on. So what you need is 6 or more images taken from a specific camera position in a completely dark room. It needs to be pitch black. Then the flashlight needs to be turned around the subject for each picture. You can do this clockwise or counterclockwise, but they need to be consecutive. You cannot just take a picture and then from top left corner and then another from the bottom right and then another from in the middle or something. They need to be in order. And I usually take 6 images, as that is often enough, but you can take more if you want to. And lastly, after you've created these pictures, you want to turn on the display of your iPad, for instance, and this is how you get your subsurface scattering map, and that will also be used later for creating the opacity map. And I should probably mention, to avoid jittering from pressing the trigger, I usually set the camera to a 2 seconds delay timer, so no fingers are on the camera while the photo is being taken. That is very important. And also, if the position changes only slightly, the position of your iPad or the position of the camera, the entire data set will be compromised and you need to start all over again. The same counts for like moving really anything in your setup, because then if the stuff is not aligning correctly anymore, this needs to be all perfectly aligned and must not be moved. All right. Next demo session, obviously we can't take any pictures here, but I will show you really quickly how to take the pictures that you've taken into Substance Designer and then create your leaf texture out of that. So let's take a look at that. It will take a little bit to load because we are dealing with 5K images and 4K texture here. All right, there we go. Before we get started, I want to show off the juicy details that we get from this method of creating textures. I hope this is coming across in the stream. So we really get the highest fidelity of detail in the normal map and the base color that you could ever imagine. I really love this method. It will give you very good looking results, especially because if you pick leaves that are interesting like those, they have like little bug bites and brown spots and stuff, that really sells the look. It's a good question. What I can recommend if you don't have a lighting table, I guess you could build one yourself. I've seen some tutorials about that as well. So you could use like some thin paper and a phone light that you put, maybe if you have a glass table, right? If you have a like, how you call them? I don't know. Like just a glass table would do. And you put maybe some white paper on it that is thin enough so light can shine through, and then you have a torch or something that you put underneath, and that way you could get like something backlit. I think that is basically a lighting. This is how it works. So this way you could build your own lighting table in a cheap way. I hope that answers that question. Other than that, a lighting table is super cheap. I haven't bought one myself, but they are like 150 quid or something. Okay, so I want to quickly cover this setup. We'll have our 6 pictures here, as you can see, plus the subsurface scattering picture, which is also really nicely showing all the veins and stuff. And there's 2 nodes that are integral to this workflow, which is called multi-angle to albedo and multi-angle to normal. So the multi-angle to albedo, and I'll show that by taking out these things. So, well, maybe we should keep that one in, so we have an alpha. So as you can see here, the base color is slowly building up. If we go in the multi-angle to albedo, now we get the light from one direction, we're at another one. It will now cancel each other out. We'll add another one. We'll add another one. The next one. The next one. So I hope you can see how the sort of like shadows and the light information is getting removed out of the texture, and the same is going on with the normal map creation. So in the multi-angle to normal, and here we have the setting clockwise or counterclockwise, and this is why it's so important that your pictures are taken consecutively. so this node can work properly. So if we plug in the first one, we can already see that a leaf is appearing. We plug in the second one, and you can see how this node is based on your image data and the different lighting angles, building up this normal map for you. Right, and then the subsurface scattering one can be used to obviously create the subsurface scattering map, but it can also be used to do a histogram scan on that, because the screen is so bright that there is like no detail on it. You can easily use that one to create your opacity map out of that. And then what I've done here, I've used the base color, the normal map, and the subsurface scattering to combine that info that I have in my channels to create a nice roughness map, which is why we get this nice reflection on cellular level in there. So yeah, that's the quick demo on this one. It is fairly simple to set up. Just take your pictures, throw them in. These two nodes will do the heavy lift, and the rest is just whatever you like to put on top to make this material look even more convincing. Okay. Now let's take a look at the leaf cluster creation. So for the leaf cluster creation, we also need to take a look again at some theory. So you should ask yourself the question, which components do I need? And think of all plant variations. Do not only, the cluster needs to work for all the plant variations that you're working on. The saplings, the large ones, the medium ones. So make sure that you have covered everything so you can create your plant. So common components of this are a main bare branch, a bare branch extender, a main leafy branch, a leafy branch extender, a leafy branch filler, single leaves, some fruits maybe, and a bark strip. What can also help is to break down your tree into something that is easier to understand for your brain. So what I sometimes like to do is I do some overpainting in Photoshop or something to figure out what the actual branch structure looks like, so I can I have a better understanding of what I need to build in Speedtree. And it's also quite handy to know how the tree is built in general, like where do the trunks split, where is card geometry starting, and stuff, which leads us to this next slide. Actually, I want to talk about geometry branches and card geometry. So you need to understand the tree first, so you can make the call on like where to switch from branch geometry to card geometry. And then the card geometry will have to be integrated in the leaf cluster. So this is why it's important to know as much as possible about the tree and how it's built. And I also want to talk about the silhouette of trees. So trees in forests are different from trees which are standing alone in a field. Forest trees, they make space for other trees, or they are getting blocked off by other plants. They grow in certain directions. We already had that with a windswept tree, for instance. So you should ask yourself the question, is my tree made to be used with other trees in a forest biome, or is it a standalone version? Standalone versions are usually what you think of how a tree looks like. It's the ideal beauty standard, a nice tree crown growing in all different directions. But this is what we think they look like, but the reality is that most trees are not like that. They grow next to other plants which influence their appearance, and taking this into consideration, we will be able to create much more realistic foliage that fits our needs. So finding out these pieces is quite important. All right, then let's take a look at the leaf cluster. So as mentioned, the leaf cluster is being created in Speedtree. You can use photogrammetry for it as well if you have like entire fronts, like entire branches, and you actually have a lighting table that is big enough to do this, then by all means go for it. But yeah, Speedtree is doing a decent job. And this tab is probably also one of the most time-consuming steps in the entire plant creation process, apart from the texture creation and Substance Designer, because it will make or fail your tree creation. So make sure you spend enough time on this and think about the correct way of attaching leaves to branches, and make sure that this looks decent enough. Because if this is looking wrong, then everything you create with it is looking wrong. The problems are populating downstream. If your leaves look bad in Substance Designer, the leaf cluster will be worse than it could be, and the entire plant will be worse as it could be. All right. So let's take a look at the leaf cluster in Speedtree then, which leads us to our next short demo session. So here we have the leaf cluster. And so obviously there won't be enough time to recreate this whole thing, but I will talk about the considerations again and then what you need to know to set this up properly. So what I like to do for the leaf clusters is I always use and again, I'm sorry, like I can't give an introduction on how Speedtree works from the ground up. There's not enough time for this. I just assume for now that you have a basic knowledge, or maybe get back to it when you've watched some beginners tutorials or something. I will focus now on the specific parts on how to create this and sort of like jump into this. So we have a generic trunk tube that should just be a tube without any detail. And you can see this here, obviously it's from top down. So let me actually jump into perspective, which is something you should never do. I'll get to that in a bit. So this is what we can see in perspective view. We have a trunk, and we have a single branch attached to this trunk. And then this trunk should be ideally set to do not render. So under the skin properties, you can set the type from polygons to spine only, which will make this not being rendered in your atlas, which is great. So it should be like that. I haven't done this because it's basically invisible from the top, so I did not worry about that. And this way you then attach a node, like a branch node, and that way you basically build a tree. You build multiple small trees in order to create this texture, and you can see this already. This is why you should take time with this. This is basically the amount of work you need to create. You need to create the final plant multiplied by 3 or 4. So actually, what you figure out is that the actual plant creation in the end is the shortest and quickest bit of the entire pipeline. It's the texture creation and the preparation that needs the most. It's the most time consuming. So, and I should probably cover here as well how to get the leaves in here. So I've shown you how to create the textures and the atlas and stuff, but how do we get it in Speedtree and how do we set it up properly? So we have a material created which is called photoscanned maple leaves, and here we see our texture inputs. They have just been input, loaded from disk, and that's it. And what you do, how Speedtree works, is you then can attach meshes to your material. You would do that by going to meshes, and you can add a new mesh. So we could, to showcase this, let's call this now demo leaf. So this is now in the list of meshes, but it's currently not attached to the material. So what we need to do is we need to add another component, and we call the demo leaf. See, something changed here already, because apparently some nodes were using a generation method where it picks randomly from this list of leaves. And if you expand your list afterwards, obviously that random calculation will be readjusted and it might start picking other leaves, which is why I'm always a little bit careful with that sort of like random assignment. But yeah, that's a specific side note. Okay, so currently this demo leaf doesn't have a mesh. And what we do now is we go into this leaf cut outer, and we'll take this midrib indicator and we'll move it to where the leaf starts, like here. and the angle will then define the direction of the leaf, which is straight up. Then this is here by default already. I usually delete all of this because it never fits our needs. And then you just click on the screen, and that way you create your card cutout. It's as simple as that, and I really like to work with this. So what I want to mention is that usually you would do like low poly stuff, but in the Leaf Atlas, as this is just being rendered out as a 2D texture, you can go all out, creating a high resolution mesh, and that will help you bending the leaves here in the most natural way as well. Don't be worried. This scene can have 100,000, 200,000 of polygons. That's totally fine, because in the end, you will just end up with a 2D texture. And then you would press this little arrow here, which will then make it a leaf. And then this is unimportant. This is for LODs. I'll cover that later. We don't need LODs in this. So there we have our leaf. And now we can use that leaf to attach it to our branches. All right. So as I mentioned already, I've gone into this perspective view, which is something you should never do, because now I screwed up my camera setup. So you want to lock your camera to the XY plane, for instance. And make sure that it fills in this red rectangle. So this red rectangle is called the screenshot save frame, and this is basically the texture that will be rendered out when you export the texture. So this needs to align perfectly, and things you shouldn't like go over it, because that is not being rendered. And if you zoom in and out, you sometimes, as I did now, I lost my locked camera, so it will be hard now for me to align this properly again. It's kind of like, because this bark strip here also needs to perfectly stop at the top and at the bottom, so it will be tileable and running through. And I'm kind of like, I screwed over myself here now. So what I usually do is I press this little button, lock camera. So now if I press something here, you can't move the camera anymore. It's locked. And that will help you from accidentally zooming in and out of your scene. So I guess that is everything I wanted to cover in this demo part. Yeah. Getting back to bark textures. So we kind of mentioned this already. So trees can look very different, and the same tree sometimes can have 10 different barks. Even on the same tree, you sometimes find different bark textures. And as mentioned already, just pick the most relevant, use that one for recreation. And like bark for saplings, for sapling trees, like the one here in the center, that one you can attach to your atlas in Speedtree, as shown here, because then for sapling versions of the tree, you can then unwrap the trunk on this strip, and you don't need the second material. That is just something to keep in mind for performance in game engines and stuff. So ideally you want to avoid like having too many different materials on your foliage. So if you have one for your leaves and you have one for your trunk, that is usually enough. But for smaller versions, you might not even need one for your trunk, and then you can just use this strip here. Okay. Yeah, and this leads us to the next quick demo session, where I want to cover my thought process of creating simple bark textures, which is also fairly straightforward. Again, you can push this to the most complex level of detail. I've shown you the bark texture in the very beginning by Preston O'Brien I found on ArtStation. I find that is almost looking photorealistic, and you can push it that far. It will just take you a week or something. But yeah, let's take a look at that. Speedtree tutorials, that's usually, so Speedtree, the company, that has created Speedtree, they have their own YouTube channel, and they do great tutorials showing literally everything, all the features, everything you need in Speedtree. So I can highly recommend that. I want to be honest, I haven't watched that many tutorials because I got mostly mentored by senior foliage artists, at Blizzard when I was working on Diablo, or in my company now as well. And that is the way I got my Speedtree knowledge. But I can highly recommend their the Speedtree official YouTube channel, where they actively publish new tutorials, also about the new features in Speedtree 9 and Speedtree 10. So they keep everything up to date, and I can highly recommend those. They go in detail as well, and they are sometimes 1 hour long, and they really show you the process from getting from nothing to an entire tree. All right, so for bark textures, we don't go too much into detail here, but I just want to show you the setup. So what I like to do when working on bark textures is see this as a sort of like factory. So we have a mainstream, and the mainstream is, you think of a bark as a surface that starts with nothing, and you add like flakes on top, you remove parts from it, you add some other bits on top, and then you remove some stuff. So it's constantly adding or removing from this base workflow, or like mainstream, right? So, and what I like to do is I like to set up, like whenever I add something to that base, I'll create a frame around it so I know exactly what feature it is I'm adding. So we are having subtle directional cuts base, for instance. So I know this in this step from here to here, subtle directional cuts are being created or added to my bark texture. Next, subtle global directional cuts will be added. As you can see here, the difference. We get some subtle cuts in here. Next one is global spots. As you see, some global spots appeared there. And then so on and so forth. And you can then use these blocks to also link your base color information with that. So you would start with a flat base color, and you use the masks that are being used to add a certain feature to your height map. Like in here, this is the mask for adding subtle directional cuts. You can then give this a bespoke color in the color section. And in here again, or here, you add the spots, and the mask for adding spots is this one here. And using this mask, you can add more color information, so you can give the spots a certain color as well. So that is my way of creating bark textures. And to get started, I wanted to mention that as well. Useful nodes is directional scratches, and Voronoi or Voronoi fractal. You can see these already have this kind of flaky texture to start with. This one here as well, and that is a great start for getting started with like bark textures. And by applying things like histogram scan, a threshold, a warp, and another warp, you get this other sort of like bark flake texture already, and it looks fairly convincing. Another thing I wanted to mention is that by default, Substance Designer creates textures that are square, like this. And also for this one, I've added my custom resource, which is this preview cylinder. I like to preview bark textures on a cylinder in Substance Designer, so we get the correct look and feel of the texture we are working on. And obviously, it's again not working. I really don't like this view outputs in 3D view. Sometimes the 3D view is a little bit bugged, especially when you're importing custom materials or custom meshes. Well, that is not looking like it's working. Whatever. We have a PBR render node here, which is showing off everything nicely as well. And it's kind of important to preview your texture on a cylinder, because it will look different in comparison to the classic plane that you get. And I changed the aspect ratio to 2K by 4K, 1K by 2K, because that will give you some more space to add detail in the vertical direction in your texture, because you could even go more crazy and do a like 1K by 4K, right? To make sure to get more detail in verticality. That is basically the reason why you're doing that, and you're not using a square texture. Okay. I see some discussions about Speedtree licenses. I can quickly mention it's fairly annoying. There is like, it is fairly expensive. There's no perpetual license that you can buy. And I already want to say this. You are not allowed, well, take this information with a grain of salt. My information is about a year or 2 years old. But I've once read through the Speedtree licensing documentation, and they state that you are not allowed to sell any tree models that are being created in Speedtree, not even with the pro version that you are paying for, because they have that sort of mentality that the trees are created by the software, because it's the software that's creating the tree, not the artist, which is it could be questionable. Whatever you think about this, I just want to say, even if you have a pro license, you are not allowed to sell your trees. You can only use Speedtree to create stuff in closed packages like games or demos or something like that that are being sold as a standalone product. But you cannot sell single trees. That is information from 1 year ago. Please take this with a grain of salt. All right. Then let's get to the, I guess, last big topic, which is the actual plant creation. So plant creation is done in Speedtree, obviously. And as already mentioned, you want to work on different trees. You want to have a large, a medium, a small, a sapling, whatever you need. And I usually start with a large version. This is because the large version of a plant is obviously often the most complex one. So you will have to set up everything you need in order to create this tree. And the more simplistic versions can be only more simplistic. So you will only need less. So what you can do then is you can just duplicate the file, the Speedtree file, and then create the tree or the small version of a tree from scratch, but you have the textures and the atlas and the leaf cutouts and the materials already all set up in your Speedtree file. So this is why I always start with a complex version. We do texture import, card cutting, plant creation, and manual authoring. And I really want to jump on manual authoring here as the main takeaway, as this is often overlooked as well. So what we can see here is the comparison between a manual author tree, where the branches are carefully moved to their location, and a Speedtree tree where branches are randomly attached to the plant. It lacks a good composition and art direction. It can have overlapping leaves and intersecting branches. And comparing these two, I hope you can clearly see that the left one is looking much more convincing. And this step can take some time, as you actually need to manually move some branches, some branch nodes to their specific location by hand. But I hope you see that it pays off if you do so. Again, I want to talk about a topic that we already talked about, which is the difference from, or the difference between a field version of a tree, like the one we can see here on the left, to a forest version. So here you can see it makes space for its surrounding. It gives some breathing space in the lower sections for some smaller trees to emerge in the forest. They are potentially blocked in growth in a certain direction. They are usually much more vertical than field trees, as they want to reach for light. And it basically what trees in a dense forest are doing. They try to grow as tall as they can because they all want to compete for the best spot to get the most light. So they usually have a sparser canopy at the top, and almost no leaves or something like that at all in the bottom sections, because the forest is getting quite dark and you get the sort of like understory bushes and then other layers of the forest there. All right, then wind animation set LED. I just want to mention this really quickly. We're not going to cover this into detail. It can be done in Speedtree. It is very simple. It has sometimes been done in Engine to get more realistic results, but it may require tech art support and cannot be done by you as an artist. So there is a wind wizard in Speedtree that you can use to set up your wind, and it does everything for you pretty much. And the LODs are being set up in a way that you can see here on the right. You get your card cut out again, and there's a high, a medium, and a low mesh. And you would just readjust your mesh, remove a couple polygons, and then check this in for the medium version and for the small version, for the low versions. And this is how to create LODs. All right, then variance and fine-tuning. So I mentioned already, I just wanted to give it its own slide. Start with a complex tree, work towards the simple one. You can keep the settings. It will save your time. You have more time for the fun part, which is the actual tree creation. But it is the fastest step probably in the entire pipeline. And now I would like to show you a little demo of how to create such a tree in Speedtree. We first take a look at the large version I've created here, and I would like to take this apart by hiding all the nodes and then re-enabling those to show you how that is being built. So we would start with a main trunk that is doing this, which is not much. Don't forget about the roots. They will add a lot to your trees. As already mentioned, they will make them grounded. And then we get trunk extensions, which is the first big branches that come out of your trunk. And afterwards, we get the big branches. The big branches is then the next layer of branches coming out of the trunk extensions. And now I want to talk about something that people, or especially beginners, I would say, often do. They rush the process a little bit by adding their leaf cards and card branches to this structure already, which is way too early. You really need to give the tree space to develop its branch structure. I can show this on the reference here again. So as we can see here, we are now, so what we have enabled is the trunk, this big branch, and maybe the next one. But all this stuff here is still missing. And only after this, at the very end of this, we get leaves. So the problem you get into when skipping these steps of hierarchy is that you will attach very small branches and leaves to super thick trunks. It will look very off and beginner-like, and you will get a dense canopy in the center of the tree. Like you will get leaves in here, and your tree looks like a blob of leaves. Which is not at all what a tree is like. The tree has, compared to the amount of branches, relatively few leaves. And they only grow, or mostly, I should probably say, grow on the outer edge of the tree. Which makes sense, because why would there be any leaves in the core of the tree where no light is hitting? So that is, I think, one of the important takeaways I would like to give. And so keeping that in mind, we add more branches. So we add medium branches to these big branches. And even now, we are not adding our card branches. We add more geometry branches. Keep in mind to go down in the poly count though, otherwise your tree will explode. And you should keep it, like for AAA trees nowadays, I would say a tree can be 30 to 50k in polygons. And with new workflows like Unreal Engine 5, which now also supports nanite foliage, You can even have trees that have like 250,000 polygons, and we are at a point where you do not even use like alpha maps anymore. The leaves are cut out as a single leaf, and that way you can apply much more realistic wind animation to them as well, because every single leaf is a single leaf. The lighting works much better, as you don't need to rely on heavily bent normal maps, because every single leaf is working as it does. But yeah, for a current generation or last generation tree, I would say 30 to 50k is a good amount for a AAA game tree. Okay, then we finally start with card branches. So this is not geometry anymore. This is our 2D cards, and they are extending. Mainly, the first layer here is extending our big branches. So this is to again add another layer of fidelity. Some here as well. What I've also done is on some of them I've added a branch crossing, which gets rid of the cardy look, and we sort of like don't add up with these angles where you get this sort of like where the plane is stuck in a 0-degree angle towards the camera, and then you can't see any branches anymore. This is why sometimes you want to go with like crossed geometry, so you have something to see from all different angles. So that's that. Then we have a couple smaller leaves, and we have more branches. We have extender branches. This is why we made the extender branches. The extender branches are now extending our core branches. So I hope the idea of working out these branch levels is coming across. And then the next layer would be the last generation. I called it last generation main leaves. I guess that's made up term by me, but that is sort of like the first main layer of leaves. And guess we can enable all of them at once. Goes a little bit quicker. So this is your main canopy, and then on top of that we have fillers, and the fillers I'll zoom in here a little bit. Again, we have flat cards, and what the fillers is doing, they are sort of like adding three-dimensionality on top of them to give it a better look. And then what we also get is the small extender branchlets. These are again attached to the first generation of leaves, and they are extending the canopy to the sort of like current growth. And the current growth is then this, which is extending the canopy once again, and it's again supported by another set of fillers to really make the canopy look as rich as it can be. So if we enable all of those, see, we get the nice fill that you would expect from the top outer sections of a canopy. And we still get a fairly sparse looking tree interior, I would say, which is something you would expect. I could add some more bare branches to this, maybe some smaller dead leaves or something like we can see here. It is also unrealistic to have no leaves in the center of a tree. There could be a few, but you really want to avoid to like fill your tree with leaves, because like I quite like this phrase. The senior foliage artist at my company basically told me the juicy part of a tree is the branches and not the leaves. It's about this. It's about this detail here that you want to see. This is what makes your tree look realistic and high fidelity and high poly, and it's not about the leaves. All right, then let's take a look at the other variations. So here we have a sapling version, and this is also what we needed the other leaf cards for that I've prepared. Then we got the medium one, and why I want to show the medium one is to get back to the recipe that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, and why the front references that you collect, these ones here, why they are so important. As we can see here, this gives us an indication about how the tree is being built. We can see a structure where we have a main branch and we have a pair of leaves attached to the trunk in alternating fashion. So you have them attached in that direction, and then the next node up, they are turned 90 degrees. The next node up, they are turned 90 degrees again, and so on and so forth. And in Speedtree, I'll show you that in a bit as well, we get these generation methods, and these can be used to make your tree as it should be. Yeah, then we have the large version here, and again we can see what makes it look sort of like nice and high fidelity is the dead branches here, and this would be the forest version of the tree. So we can see that it's developing its canopy into rather one direction and not the other one, because you could put other trees next to this, or it's dying off in here because there's less light reaching the canopy, things like that. I see there's a little bit time left for maybe taking this and deleting everything, I guess. This action will result in loss of, yes. So, and I want to quickly cover how you can get started on creating a tree like that. So we would go and add geometry to selected, and we start by adding a trunk. And what I can also recommend is setting the settings in Speedtree to meters, because it's by default set to feet. So this is the scale indicator. This is currently a human being, and this tree is fairly big. So let's scale this trunk down by a fair bit and reduce the radius a lot. Also, something you should avoid is like tapering the branches too much, or the trunks, because they really only taper when they split off. They do not really taper that much if there's no split. What you can do then is you can add branches. We could go for tubes, which is adding tube branches. It looks like a propeller now. I like this. In the spine section, or actually no, in the generation section, you can then pick whether you want to extend a parent or not. If we press extend parent, it will extend the parent, which is quite useful to extend your canopy in that direction. And again, we don't want to have that much of tapering. And I guess we can already, because we have the material set up, we can add our trunk material to this. So, and now we can use several things like start angles, gravity, and the length modifier, and noise in order to manipulate these branches. So, and now things become interesting, because if we now duplicate this node and basically add it on top of itself, reducing the length. So this is now a topic I want to talk about. This is where the manual authoring comes in. So what we can see here is, and this is what's the difference between a generic created Speedtree tree and a Speedtree tree that is hand authored. The difference here is that the branches are currently attached in an unnatural way to their parent branch. And what you probably want to do is move them to a location where it makes sense. So you go in node mode and handpick single branches. And it looks like here. This looks like a sweet spot to have another branch coming out of. Oh, actually, well, because that is an extender now, I can't move it there. That's a bad example. So let's pick this one here. So this looks like a good spot where another branch could come out of. So I would take this branch and move it in here, because you see this little kink, right? So it makes sense that another branch is coming out out exactly there. So even here, like you see this, so you would expect maybe a split, a branch split right there instead of here. So you move it right there, and you can already see that this branch structure is looking much more convincing than what was created by default. Obviously, I went with the most generic settings here. You can go through the generation methods. Whenever you start attaching something to your plant, there's different types of generation methods. You get like classic, proportional steps, phyllotaxy, bifurcation. Those are probably all terms that you can't you don't know much about, but these things are different types of how branches are attached, or maybe how even leaves are attached to their parent. And as I showed in the very beginning, where I was showing the books, for instance, you can get leaves that are spawning opposite of each other, like here, or in a spiral way or something. And this is then, you need to pick the correct method. And this is why I said it is important to have that front reference and to know the recipe of the tree that you're working on, because that recipe you need to use when you create the tree in Speedtree. So that is basically the most important thing to keep in mind. And well, then after you've built out your branch structure here, you can then add leaves. And don't be fooled, this is called a leaf now. You can also rename nodes and call it a branch. And we would pick our material, which is leaves. And then we have all the meshes that we added to our material, like the main branch. And we probably need to scale them up here. And boom, there you have your card branches. And by adjusting the orientation, you can then make them face in the right direction. For the tree that I've created, I also used forces. Where is it? Oh, I've basically deleted it. So the forces are quite helpful to push things in certain directions. So this force, for instance, is pulling the leaves in a certain direction, which is an easy way of making leaves point outwards or to the left, to the right. Or you can use forces like this to bend the tree. I think it's this force, if even. Bend the tree in a certain direction, and you end up with an entirely different tree. I guess this is why it's called Speedtree. You can get fairly quick results with the stuff that you're creating, but always make sure that you add the hand-authored step on top, because that is what you need to make things look really good. All right. That covers the plant creation. And now I would like to get to some starter recommendations, as mentioned in the very beginning. So there's, if you want to start out with foliage creation, there is a few free software pieces that you can download. I would like to start with mentioning Substance Designer. There is a perpetual license on Steam. I think it's £175, 145 pounds, 170 euros or something. You would have to check depending on the country you're living in. I can highly recommend that, because then you don't have to pay for a monthly subscription. And perpetual license means that you can keep that software forever. You get 1 year. You get 1 year of update, 1 year of updates, and afterwards you have floating license. You can keep that forever. Next, we were working with the Speedtree Learning Edition, so I can highly recommend that. It's just a little bit unfortunate that you can't export anything out of Speedtree Learning Edition. But it's a good way of practicing it if you're really thinking about getting in the gaming industry as a foliage artist, because that is the piece of software that is used. I use it on a daily basis. It's really important to practice plant creation in that specific software if you want to do something professional with it. Then we have Treeit, which is free software. You can download it on Steam for a very small price. I think it's about two whatever currency if you want to support the creator. or you download it on his website, which where it is for free, I believe. So it is looking like a Windows 2010 application, but it is. Don't be fooled by that. It's fairly powerful. I guess the way of how the interface looks like is not really a concern. It's about the creation methods, and this is looking fairly similar to Speedtree, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. So if you don't want to buy any licenses, then this software is really good. I've used it myself for private modding projects and things like that, where I can't use a official license, so it's really good. And then what I've recently discovered, and it's not a new piece of software, but it's free since April this year, I think, is Plant Factory by Eon Software. It is not supported anymore. They've stopped the production of the software and the support with it, but this is also apparently a really good software to create plants with. Again, I haven't done much with it so far. I'm still in the process of learning it myself, but it looks fairly convincing. It has a really good renderer. The interface also looks up to date, and you can apparently create many more things. Even what I want to say is, like, you can create even things that are not plants in this software. Then that question was already asked. I can dig up some even more specific information. I've not ordered these books on the internet. I went to a local library here in the UK and bought these books. It's the Collins Tree Guide. I guess that is a little bit more specific for the UK, as it's a field guide to trees of Britain and Europe. So if you're living in Europe, also quite helpful. Why I like that why I like that book is it got illustrations. It's not a book that has photos in there, but the illustrations are colored and they are very detailed, and it always comes with a good explanation, and it covers all the different features of trees. So it's really good for when you want to identify a certain tree or plant in general. So that is why I really like that book. And the other book is Handbook Trees, which has actual photographs in there. And I bought this book in specific for a personal project where I'm creating a complex leaf generator in Substance Designer. And it really goes down to all the granular basics. Like, it is talking about, it's going very much into detail. It's talking about what different types of venation do exist. Then a little fun fact I can mention is palm trees are actually no trees. They are their own group. So there's three groups. We have conifers, we have broadleaves, as mentioned already, and palm trees are their own group. That is because for a tree to be identified as a tree, it needs to have a trunk that is growing in thickness over the years, which gives you these sort of like rings that you can expect on a tree trunk. And palm trees start with a certain thickness already from when they are young, and they just grow infinitely up without increasing their trunk thickness. And they also don't have a canopy and any branch structure, which is why they are no trees. So all these little fun facts I've learned from that book, I can highly recommend. Okay, and then last but not least, we are getting to the end of this workshop. I want to talk a little bit about how I became a foliage artist and what you can do if you want to become a foliage artist. So in my specific case, I've entered the industry as a environment artist. So I was a general environment artist, and I later on specialized in foliage creation. And I would say, like, you often get the opportunity, or there is a potential opportunity to switch departments. That is something that happens fairly often in the gaming industry. You are never really locked in something specific. What I mean by that is, if you join the company as an environment artist, I don't see a problem where you couldn't switch to becoming a lighting artist, or specializing in lighting art, specializing in foliage creation, specializing to become a material artist. All these things can usually be done. And as mentioned already, I personally was trained by industry veterans. As I was working on Diablo with Blizzard, I had some people working there for 10 years, and they were a top foliage artist, top environment artist, and they taught me so much. I've basically learned more in 4 months from them that any university could have taught me in a year or something. So I guess what I want to say, the way you learn is so much faster when you work with professionals. There's really nothing comparable. And you should have a personal interest in nature. I mentioned that in the beginning already. If you have that, I guess you can become a great environment artist or a great foliage artist as well. It's like having this keen eye for detail when you go outside and check your surroundings, building up your visual library. That is basically what you're doing when doing that. I guess that is one of the key things that got me in the industry as environment artist, and then later as foliage artist, that you sort of like you do not close your eyes when you're going outside. You basically embrace your surrounding and take that information, add it to your visual library, which will then help you when you work on games to make things look convincing. Another advice I can only give is like to combine your skills. Don't think about everything being in separate buckets. When you are an environment artist, you will find it very easy to adapt to be a foliage artist. There's probably a lot of skills that are overlapping, and there shouldn't be anything that will hold you back from not specializing in a certain direction. I guess that's everything I can give. If you have any more specific questions to this or any other topics, then feel free to ask. This is the end of the workshop. Thank you very much for listening, and it's a QA time. So if you have any questions, or if there's any questions that have been left unanswered, I'll get back to those now.
Thank you so much, Dennis Welling, for your time and sharing this amazing workshop with us. These workshops are only available with the support of our loving community, and I want to thank each and every one of you for making the time and making it a thriving place for learning and growth. If you want to join all these beautiful artists and level up your own environment art skills, then please head on over to beyondextend.com, where you can become a member of our community, where we offer weekly work reviews, a 250-page book full of tips, portfolio reviews, and much more. All of the links can be found in the description down below. So, stay creative, and I hope to see you there.